And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Marie Musi.
And our guest is Vagabond Beaumont. Welcome, Vagabond.
Nice to be here.
Filmmaker and political activist, and somebody who knows a lot about things that are going on right now as we speak. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah,
I
welcome
appreciate
to the
it.
show.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Okay, and well, let's start because it's the most obvious, and I'm going to switch the view so folks in the studio audience can see it, in the at home can see it, and that is the Machetero's film poster. Very interesting. Could you describe, Vagabond, what exactly that poster represents?
Well, it's the poster for my film, Machetero, which is a fictional film about the Puerto Rican independence movement. The macheteros were originally cane workers, people who worked in the fields. And when the Spanish-American War happened, a group of cane workers got together and fought with the Spanish against the U.S., and they were known as macheteros. Mm-hmm. And in the 1960s, there was an underground clandestine group that was called El Ejército Popular Boricua, or the Popular Puerto Rican Army. And their nickname was Los Macheteros.
Oh, they went to the past.
Right. They had a saying, Todo Boricua machetero. So every Puerto Rican is a machetero. And so I took the liberty of that, and used it as the title for my film. This was their logo. I've redesigned it somewhat in green and red. I made it all red.
And this is the knife that they use.
Yeah, the machete, and then the star symbolizes the star of Puerto Rico that's on the flag. So.
Right.
And when you say cane, you mean sugar cane.
Yeah, sugar cane. Yeah, sugar cane. Yeah.
Who's the fellow, the saint with the machine gun?
That's not for profit. People may recognize him from a band called Reconstruction. Uh-huh. They were from Harlem, and we used to play at CBGB Records. We were the first band. I worked with Reconstruction. I wasn't in the band, but I worked with them. And they were the first band to ever be signed to CBGB Records. Mm-hmm. And
that's interesting.
He plays the lead. His name is Pedro Taino, which is a made-up name, a combination.
So why did you choose to do a fictional movie instead of a documentary about that movement?
The idea for the film really came from 9/11.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened was, after 9/11 happened, I was kind of waiting for some sort of a dialogue about why someone would do that to the United States. Not whether they were justified or unjustified or whatever. Just what are the why?
A dispassionate view, sort of a dispassionate view of the people involved in a movement that would.
Whether they choose that particular action.
Right,
yeah.
right. You know, and
I never subscribed to the idea that the people, this is controversial, at 9/11 or no matter how horrendous what they did were cowards. I mean, I don't think people who fly planes into buildings are cowards, and I know that's controversial to say, but, and I don't agree with what they did, but at the same time, I don't think they're cowards.
Right, and so the thing is that that conversation never really happened, and I was kind of frustrated by it, and I wanted to do something about terrorism and terrorists and how that whole thing gets defined. But I knew I couldn't do something about 9/11 because it was already a polarizing kind of a thing. People already had staked their ground, chosen their sides, and that was that. So I decided to use the colonialism of Puerto Rico and the United States and the relationship between them, and that there's always been an aspect of the Puerto Rican independence struggle that has been violent,
And so did you think you'd find the answer to the why?
Yes. I thought that I really wasn't looking for the answer. What I was looking for is for people to start asking the question. There's an answer for me in terms of the Puerto Rican struggle, but in terms of a larger struggle, in terms of maybe third world imperialist, colonialist, neo-colonialist struggle, the answers are clear for me. In this sort of much more nebulous world of this terrorism thing where you can't quite put your finger on what it is that people have a problem with and why
and what result they want.
Right, exactly. I mean, what is the end result? What is it that they hope to gain in the end?
Right, because with a lot of movements, there's a pretty distinct mission.
Right, and this doesn't seem to be that. Or if it is, it's not something that anybody really kind of sort of agrees with.
There's sort of an element of vengeance in it. I mean, there were some things, because I remember the Macheteros back in the 80s, didn't they blow up a bunch of U.S. Air Force planes
Correct.
that were about to be shipped to El Salvador?
Right.
I thought that was actually, I wouldn't have done it myself or support anybody doing it, but that was an interesting act.
Right, and that was done because on April 4th of 1980, a few days ago, the anniversary just passed, 11 members of the FALN were arrested. And so what's really interesting about that operation was that they blew up 11 planes and videotaped it.
Oh, wow.
And they only blew up 11 planes. And then they made the announcement in their communique on the video saying, we only blew up 11. We could have blown up more. And we're trying to say that we blew this up in response to the arrest of the FALN members in Chicago, or actually Evanston, Illinois. And we don't appreciate you using Puerto Rico as a means of attacking other Latin American nations that Puerto Rico has no problems with, like El Salvador, Nicaragua, and so on and so forth. And that's where things would take off, from Puerto Rico to go do these missions.
Are we ready to look at a clip of the movie? I think we have a... okay, great.
Maybe I should just give a quick synopsis of the film.
Yeah.
The film is about a sort of a conglomeration of political prisoners distilled into this one character who is being interviewed by a journalist who's from France. And the journalist is asking why he uses violence as a means of liberation. And so while that's happening, there's another young ghetto youth growing up to become the next Machetero as they're having a discussion. So here we go.
Okay, excellent.
Do you find it strange that in your struggle for freedom you find yourself in prison?
No. Just because there aren't any bars on the windows, locks on the doors, or guards at the gate doesn't mean you're in prison.
Y Puerto Rico ha sido colonia por muchos años.
Freedom will be our salvation, liberation our religion, and self-determination our sanity. The ghetto will guide us in guerrilla warfare. The slum will train us to sabotage, and the barrio will teach us bomb making.
Remember that book you wanted?
Yeah, what about it?
It's like a warrior's manual. A warrior's code.
Tú tienes que luchar para que Puerto Rico sea libre y soberano.
Do you really believe violence would change anything?
There's a difference between violence and revolutionary violence.
On violence. Colonialism is a fire that burns uncontrollably, consuming life and devouring land. It turns bone to ember and flesh to ash. It will eventually destroy everything in its path, unless it is confronted, starved, suffocated, or burned back. Fire must be fought with fire.
Killing U.S. congressmen and CEOs and bombing U.S. military targets is taking your freedom.
Yes.
Do you find it strange that in your struggle for freedom you find yourself in prison?
No. Just because there aren't any bars on the windows, locks on the doors, or guards.
Well, welcome back. That was pretty cool. That's the film Machetero. Tell us a little bit about some of the folks like Dilcia Pagan, for example. Now, she's an interesting person, and she herself has paid a price for her political activism, hasn't she?
Yeah, I was talking to the painter, Juan Sanchez, very famous Puerto Rican painter, Juan Sanchez, and we were looking for someone to sort of be a mentor for the young man who winds up becoming in prison, not-for-profits character. And he had suggested Dilcia Pagan, and what people don't know about, well, most people don't know about Dilcia is that she was a child actress.
Oh, interesting.
She was the first Puerto Rican girl on a national television show called The Children's Hour in the 1960s on NBC.
Okay, sure.
And so, I called her very sort of nervous because I knew she was still on parole. And so I was like, look, there's this role of this film that I'm making. I'd love for you to be in it. I just don't want it to be an excuse for you to have a parole violation or anything. And so I was a little nervous about that. And she said, well, the universe is conspiring, with you. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I just got off the phone 10 minutes ago with my lawyer. I'm off parole.
Oh, all right.
Tell us a little bit about
right?
Dilcia Pagan for people who don't know who she is.
Dilcia did 20 years in U.S. prisons. She was one of those people that was arrested when the Macheteros did that bombing of those 11 planes. And she did 20 years in U.S. prisons for wanting to fight for the freedom of Puerto Rico. And she considered herself a prisoner of war. So according to United Nations rules and regulations, she didn't recognize the United States government as having being a legitimate authority over her, and so she did not participate in her trial at all.
Oh, interesting.
And so she chose prisoner of war status, which quite a few people have chosen. A few of the Black Liberation Army people have also chosen prisoner of war status. And so she did 20 years, and she was let out in 1999 by Clinton. She got clemency along with the other, I think it was 11 others who got clemency.
So tell us a little bit more. I'm not sure which direction to go into. If we want
I think we should talk about how to see it. Is it possible for people to see it, or at least
I'm working on doing self-distribution.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get it in a theater for at least 1 week in New York City, and also trying to do distribution in Puerto Rico.
Now, do you have a website that people could check out? Or
it's Machetero, as you see, Machetero -movie.com. And you can get all the information there. You can do a search for Machetero on the Facebook.
Sure, and find
there's a Facebook
page there.
there.
Great.
Yeah.
And that way you can keep up in case the screening comes to pass.
Sure.
You'll know when and where it is.
Yep. So, and if you just do a Google search for Machetero movie, we come up.
They'll come up. Bingo. Right. Good. Excellent.
Right. And I don't know if to discuss the politics of Puerto Rican independence right now, or some of the other things that we've been working on, because we met the other day at City Hall protesting the Bradley Manning situation, and I know that you know a lot about that. So I was, and you had some things to say at City Hall just a couple of days ago. So I was wondering, Vagabond, if you might tell us a little bit about what you've been working on recently.
Well, I mean, there's a continuum of Puerto Rico's situation that you can follow all the way through to today. And I always try to bring up the point when people talk about how are we going to stop imperialism in Iraq or in Afghanistan, U.S. imperialism in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now maybe in Libya. And I say, well, in my humble opinion, you will fail because you have not dealt with the first situation of U.S. imperialism, which was Puerto Rico and the Spanish-American War. And it's really funny because every single war that the United States has ever gotten into has been sort of like a plan or gone accordingly in the same way that the Spanish-American War went. There was this battleship Maine that was blown up off the coast of Cuba very suspiciously, and the next thing you know, everybody's at war. It was the same thing with Pearl Harbor. Under very suspicious circumstances, how did the Japanese bomb, the U.S. Navy in Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin in, Vietnam, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, supposed, Libyan planes bombing protesters and rebels in Libya. We don't know if that is the case or if what's the case. But every single war that the United States has gotten into has been under this false pretense that started with the Spanish-American War. And it's the beginnings of U.S. imperialism. And it's been going on 113 years, 113 years that Puerto Rico has been a colony. And unless we deal with that situation, we won't ever be able to succeed because we won't have a blueprint of how to succeed.
Well, how do you get out of this once you're in it?
Once you're in it, how do you get out of it?
Didn't the United States present itself as, in the Spanish-American War, as liberating both Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spanish tyranny?
That's true.
There was some support of that because there was Cuban Americans who were involved with that,
and if you look at it, there really is no basis on a certain level. On a certain level, there's no basis to say, well, the United States is not an imperial power. I mean, that could be argued with their expansion west and not even even in the East, it could be argued. But it's their first sort of foray outside of the confines of the continental United States. And so it's a really strange thing to have the United States be your supposed liberator. And there were people that thought that that Puerto Rico was going to gain its independence. Puerto Rico was in the process of actually gaining its autonomy from Spain in 1897. I mean, they were politically gaining their autonomy, and there was a process that was happening already. And so when the United States came, everybody thought that process would happen with the United States, and
but maybe be accelerated, whatever.
Yeah, never did. And I feel the reason that it is because Puerto Rico has what I call unfortunate geography. It's this little island that's in the coast of in the Caribbean that can keep an eye on America's backyard. And that's the whole thing.
Strategically, it's something that a country would want.
Right. Exactly.
So what is a guy sitting in the brig in Quantico, Virginia, Bradley Manning, who released a film of U.S. troops murdering basically a half dozen people in cold blood and then covering it up, as laudable as that might be, and as much suffering as he's done? What he had to do? What does that have to do with your film and with the independence movement?
Well, he's being treated like a political prisoner.
So you think it's part of the whole continuum?
Sure, it's the whole continuum of imperialism. It's like he's bringing up these things that the United States is doing that nobody wants to know. Nobody wants anybody to know. That the United States government doesn't want you to know. I mean, nobody in Puerto Rico. Children are taught American history. They're not taught Puerto Rican history, so they don't know their history. Right, and so it's no different from Bradley Manning giving you the information that, there are, U.S. militaries murdering people overseas, and we would never know that if it weren't for Bradley Manning. It's the same continuum. It's just keeps continuing.
Well, with the movie, were you hoping to educate people as well? I mean,
I was hoping to educate people and also have people come from, what I was talking about earlier, from a neutral point of view. In other words, they don't necessarily know, unfortunately, that Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States.
Right.
It doesn't seem that way, too, because we compete in the Pan American Games as a nation. We compete in the Olympics as a nation, but we can't trade with any other nation except the United States. And so there's these really weird, bizarre sort of things that
that make it a colony versus a state.
Right, but there's these things that the United States puts up to keep people confused about the whole situation. It's not a classic colonial situation on the surface.
So you felt like you had a good opportunity to have people's minds be open as they approach the topic.
Right.
Since, I mean, in a way, it's sort of a two-edged sword.
Yes, it's a double-edged sword. Right.
That you made that pay off for you.
Right, but it's but like any. For me, filmmaking is a lot like war. You have to bring all your equipment. You have to go out into a location. You have to do your job. You have to feed. You have to bring
have a strategy.
Food. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a goal for the day. Then you finish, and you get up and you do it all over again. It's sort of like, it's very similar. And so, for me, it was like guerrilla filmmaking. You take it's the same thing in guerrilla warfare. You take your disadvantages and you use them to your advantage.
Right. Excellent.
Where do you go from here? Are you having any other movies in mind or anything you'd like to be doing in the future in the filmmaking area?
Yeah, I'm working on I just finished a short film called No Way Home, which is a radical departure from Machetero. It's more of an existential film about God and these three characters that represent the three aspects of God. They create a trinity, and they're split up and they're looking for each other because they're lost.
Oh, okay.
And then they come together.
Is it a comedy or is it?
It's not a comedy, but I mean, the way that I speak about it is funny. But I mean, it's a sort of what I call a semi-narrative experimental film.
Now, so are you writing the scripts for these movies?
Yeah, I do pretty much like Machetero was essentially me, the actors who were on at the time, and my DP Jeff, A.K. Akers. And that was pretty much it. And sometimes I would be doing sound while Jeff shot and looking over my shoulder for cops because we didn't get permits. And, it was an adventure.
That's what you call guerrilla filmmaking, right?
How long did it take you to make this movie?
I think we started in 2005 and we finished in 2009, really. I redid a little fine-tuned cut in 2009 because of Isaach de Bankolé, who's in the film. His last film was The Limits of Control with Jim Jarmusch.
Oh, okay.
And you can all see, he's been in quite a few Jim Jarmusch films. He's been in Claire Denis films. He's a pretty well-known actor, and he was more than happy to do this, and I thought it was great for him, and he was a pleasure to work with. He had one stipulation, which he said, I need to have really good coffee on the set at all times.
Okay.
I said, that seems totally doable.
Well, that's a doable one, because that's like always the thing you're looking for, right?
Right.
Wow.
At least you didn't have to sort through M&M.
Right. I didn't have to take out the green M&Ms, you know? It was totally reasonable.
Yeah,
know?
that's great.
So let's, again, on the issue of Puerto Rican independence. Now, there's been a number of plebiscites on this issue over the years, and it seems like the independence folks only get a few % of the vote. Yet there seems to be, even for folks who want statehood or continued Commonwealth status, there always seems to be a romantic urge to like or support the idea of independence, even if they don't actually vote on it. What's going on in the psyche of Puerto Rican people when they vote?
The plebiscite is a very strange thing, because the plebiscite is supposed to, according to United Nations rules and regulations, the United States is supposed to hand over total autonomy over to the Puerto Ricans. Because what the plebiscite does is it's like buying a car without test driving it, without even seeing it. It's like, I got a car, and I say it's this year, or this model, and it's got this amount of miles, and the body looks great, but you can't see it until after you buy it. It just doesn't make sense. People don't know what independence is. We've never had it. They've never had their autonomy. And according to United Nations rules and regulations, according to decolonizing a nation, they need to have a 5 to 10 year process where they have autonomy and they know what independence is. They already know what colonialism is.
Sure.
They already know what statehood might possibly be. It's not too far from colonialism, although there is some differences. But they have no idea about independence. And so independence also doesn't get a vote because a lot of the people who believe in independence don't recognize the United States government as being an authority that they should kowtow to. The other thing also is that even if every single Puerto Rican on the island had voted for independence, Congress would still have to make the decision.
Yeah.
That decision is non-binding. And so and a lot of people are like, well, why bother?
What is the value of the United States holding Puerto Rico for over 100 years now, as in this kind of situation? Is because of its strategic location?
I think
in
so,
the Caribbean,
yeah. I mean, 33,
near Haiti and Cuba. And
sure, a third of the arable land is taken over by the military. I mean, you can drive along the whole coast of Puerto Rico and not see a farm, and there was the whole, before Vieques, before the bombing exercises in Vieques were stopped, there was a battle to stop the bombing exercise on another island in Culebra. And now that the bombing exercises in Vieques have stopped,
tell folks about that. What was Vieques? What was the importance
Vieques was
of that?
a small island off the coast of Puerto Rico, that's part of Puerto Rico, that was used by the U.S. military for bombing exercises. And so
it's a beautiful island, too, like a vacation paradise
beautiful
for generations, and then all of a sudden...
And a small island. Like, you can walk from one side of the island to the other side of the island 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
So they're basically saying this land is expendable. We'll just see what it's like when you set a bomb off here.
The strange thing is that, 200 days out of the year, people live for all intents and purposes in a war zone. There's bombs going off, there's live ammunition, there's all kinds of stuff. And in 1999, a young man who was working as a security guard was killed when a plane crashed. And he was killed, and that's when the Puerto Rican people had said, we've had enough.
That's it, yeah.
We want you out of here. And they've taken themselves out, but they've refused to clean up the depleted uranium, the live ammunition rounds.
Is that what happened? Because folks, I know there was like a real popular movement. People were going to the island. They were walking out onto the bomb fields and holding hands and forcing the government to give it up. But they left in a huff. They weren't pleased. It was not a friendly leaving. They wanted to keep that island.
Right now, that land is owned by the Department of the Interior. They're supposed to clean it up.
The part of the island that was used for
the bombings was supposed to be cleaning up. And the struggle in Vieques continues because they're still trying to get people to clean it up. And this is just, this is what the other part of outside of the military aspect of the United States holding Puerto Rico is that people talk about Puerto Rico because there's, high unemployment, there's, welfare, there's WIC, these Puerto Ricans don't want to work, so on and so forth. And what people fail to realize is that Puerto Rico generates $35 billion on average a year, annually, of which $1 billion comes back to the island. So it's a cash cow.
Right. So it's also
80% of the
providing a lot of money.
pharmaceuticals that we get in the United States are made in Puerto Rico because pharmaceutical companies don't have to pay federal taxes because there's no taxation without representation. And since Puerto Rico doesn't have representation in the United States Congress,
They can't
it's a
tax
tax-free tax-free haven for so many U.S. corporations. So that's the other part of it. Is there's the corporate aspect and the military aspect.
And we got a couple more minutes, Vagabond, Beaumont, and we're talking about your film Machetero. And maybe you can inform folks how they can learn more about it and maybe see some clips.
Sure. You can go. You can do a search for Machetero movie. The website is www.machetero machetero-movie.com. That's the official website. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on MySpace. You can find us on YouTube. If you can't find us, then
You're not looking.
you're not looking.
There's how you spell it in the back. Right, exactly.
But definitely go to the website because that's where you're going to find out when it's going to be screened and you're going to
Sure.
want to see it. So,
Right.
And I have a lot of background information about the film and how certain things relate to what's going on now and what's going on and what's happened in the past. And there's all these little things that I've written, blog entries, and I'm always writing stuff.
The last minute, how about Reconstruction, the band? Are you still performing music? Is the band still performing?
They're on a sort of on a hiatus, but they actually
they did the soundtrack.
They did the score,
which is wonderful,
and
yeah.
the songs in the film are from them. It's like I was listening to their album Liberation Day to gain some sort of inspiration, and the songs started to edge their way into the film, and they were demanding to be in the film. So
Liberation Day, by the way, great album.
seven of the songs off of that album are in the movie.
I love
great.
that album.
And that was a concept album about the Puerto Rican liberation struggle, so it just made complete
perfect,
sense.
Right. How could you
And
not?
so, and they improvised the whole score that ranges sort of from Afro-Rican Caribbean rhythms to hardcore bebop, punk, jazz.
That's so
Okay.
great.
Thank you very much, Vagabond, for joining us on Let Them Talk, and keep us informed of your future projects. We'll have you on again.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right, great. It was great. And we'll see you all next week on Let Them Talk. So take care. See you.